What makes a cruiser a cruiser? Does it need to have a V-twin, loud pipes, horrible suspension, and heritage aesthetics? Or can you have something that's a little bit sportier, something with a fancy parallel twin and rider modes? Is an adherence to heritage holding this cruiser back? Or is this cruiser so fancy and newfangled that it forgot where it came from? Let's find out today. So if you're sitting at home wondering where Yammie is, he actually had to run off to Laguna Seca to cleanse his mind from all of the cruisers we've been talking about lately to ride a new RSV4, so you're dealing with just me today. Although I'm really looking forward to diving in and seeing what these motorcycles are like back to back. Now, in case you forgot, both of these motorcycles were giveaway bikes. This one is on its way to its new home, and this one is our brand new replacement modern classic giveaway motorcycle. If you want to get yourself entered to win this bike right here, brand new, hot off the presses Rebel 1100, click that link down below, go to yammienoob.co and get yourself signed up to win. Now, let's take a look at some of the history on this Scout right here. Alrighty guys, so we've talked about the Scout a little bit at length here, but just to gloss over some of the history of this motorcycle. It was first released in 1920 and it ran to 1948. It raced Harleys back in the day, it served in World War II, and after Indian went down in the early 50s, it came back in 2015 when an evil necromancer named Polaris raised the Indian Motorcycle Company from the grave, and they brought the Scout back as one of its undying minions. Now this motorcycle has an 1133cc liquid-cooled V-twin putting down 100 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque. It is a heavy motorcycle, it's all made out of metal, weighing in at about 558 pounds. Now that's a big motorcycle with a lot of heritage behind it, and they proudly display it. But let's see what the Rebel's got. I don't know, I mean, this thing's got more in common with the Africa Twin than it does with the Honda Rebel 250 from back in the 1980s and 90s when they were trying to compete with the Kawasaki 250. I mean, this motorcycle is basically brand new. Honda's been doing this for a while where they kind of create a hodgepodge motorcycle. You could kind of consider this a bigger version of the Rebel 500, but again, this has more attitude and more character than those motorcycles, so I really think it stands out on its own. Now, this motorcycle has a 1084cc parallel twin, different from the V-twin in the Scout, although this does have a 270-degree crank, so you do get that aggressive exhaust note. It's putting down 87 horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs in at only 487 pounds wet and ready to ride. So that is a nice step up from the Scout. Another thing that sets this motorcycle apart is its inclusion of technology. We have different rider modes, we have adjustable engine braking, we have adjustable traction control on this thing. It's a very modern motorcycle, even down to its inclusion of cruise control. But again, the question is whether or not all of that included technology detracts from its cruiser heritage. So let's get these motorcycles out on the road and see how they stack up. Alrighty folks, we are out here on D-Way, or just off of D-Way, and we brought both of these bikes out here to just have a nice easy cruise. A lot of times we come out here and want to get into a corner and feel how these bikes really feel on the edge of the tire, but today we're just going to take it nice and easy and relax and enjoy two different styles of motorcycling. Now, I rode in on the Rebel 1100 and you have not ridden it yet.
Not at all.
So I'm very interested to see what you think about it, having ridden in on the Scout. So let's hop out and get on the road.
Let's do it.
I already feel just how much longer this motorcycle is.
I already enjoy the seating position. The ergonomy.
Ergonomy? That's a new word that we found out today. Apparently, ergonomy is how you talk about the economy of ergonomics. This stupid motorcycle's gotta be in neutral to start. That one just kinda starts. So before we get out of here, actually, just initial thoughts, how does it feel?
It already feels like I'm riding a motorcycle in 2021.
As opposed to this big kind of couch on wheels sort of situation.
Exactly. Like, not that it doesn't have amazing power, but I like the dash, I like the setup. You know, there's something bitey about the ignition.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see how you like it out on the road, because that's actually where I found it to be the most enjoyable, was just out in a corner. It's remarkably sporty. Whoop. Immediately missed the peg on the shifter here. It's crazy hopping back on the Scout just how much more laid back this motorcycle wants to be. You know, sure, it has this big hopped up 100 horsepower engine in it, but it's wrapped up in this frame that doesn't feel like it wants to push, and the suspension doesn't feel like it rewards being pushed at all. It really does feel like the Scout is, you know, a 4/10, a 3/10 kind of bike, and then on the straights you can really crack the throttle open and feel what it's all about. I mean, sure, you could, if you want to, go searching for the pegs on this bike, but it just doesn't feel right, you know?
Not at all. I can already tell, like, if I think about hitting the throttle, it's already doing it.
Yeah, the Rebel's a lot more intuitive of a motorcycle, I think. And I think that's part of the reason why people like the Scout, is because it's kind of a brawl when you ride it, you know? You're basically pushing it around, and you're telling it what to do, and you're pushing it into corners and out of corners, and really trying to guide it and take it by the hand and be like, no, this is what we're doing. Whereas all it really wants to do is stay upright. The Rebel feels a lot more telepathic.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's crazy how torquey it is.
Right? I mean, it's a good engine. But I guess here's the question. Do you feel like you're on a cruiser? Because it's a sporty motorcycle with comfy ergonomics, but it doesn't have that V-twin engine. And obviously it doesn't sound as good as the Scout does. The Scout's a little loud because it's got straight pipes almost, and that one's got a stock exhaust. But does it give you the sensation of riding a cruiser despite the fact that it's got that Africa Twin engine in it?
If I don't think about it, my initial answer is no. It definitely feels like something of its own sort of class, which I wasn't anticipating, because it's got all the looks. You know, it's got the right seating position, but it just feels different.
Yeah, there's something about it that I agree with you. It doesn't feel 100% like a cruiser. It's almost as confused as the Vulcan is.
Yeah.
You know, it has that, like, it doesn't know what it wants to be. But I can just get with it and enjoy it as a cruiser. Although the Scout is really easy to hop on and be like, okay, I understand what this is all about. It's just, you know, lope down the highway and crack open the throttle on the straights and experience the torque, you know?
Yeah, it's very obvious.
Do you think that if that bike, if the Rebel had a V-twin in it, that it would feel different? Do you think that adding a V-twin would suddenly make it more cruisery?
I think so, just because it's like, this thing is so torquey. It's got a lot of pick up and go. It's intuitive. You can, even if you didn't tell me that this engine was from an Africa Twin, I would be like, what is it about this engine that feels so different?
So you don't, as a cruiser engine, you don't think it gels well with the kind of ethos of big V-twin?
Not necessarily, but I could see this just being, it still makes sense to some degree. You know, like it's not like it's completely wonky in here.
Yeah, I think Honda did a pretty good job of selecting the engine for that motorcycle. I understand why they did it and didn't use a V-twin, because they have V-twins in their repertoire. You know, they've got the RVT, they've got all sorts of little cruiser V-twins that they could have crammed in there, but the parallel twin, it's an interesting engine because it feels like it really wants to rev out. Like, it's got a nice smack of torque right on the bottom, but then you want to rev it out a little bit more and experience it, and then it kind of stops. Like, the party stops pretty fast on that bike. It stops at, like, I think 8,500 or 9,000 RPM, and then it's just kind of done, even though it feels like the engine has more to give. Versus this, you know, at 9,000 RPM, it's done. It's like, okay, you need to stop.
Is that something you think they did on purpose?
I think so. I think they lowered the RPM ceiling so that they could make it a little bit more torquey, and make it feel a little bit more like a cruiser. It'd be really weird to be zinging a cruiser off the red line.
Well, it's funny though, but that pickup torque, that's exactly what you want to do. You're like, okay, wait a second. This is what my, you know, throttle brain wants to do. And then to kind of be tapped out right away, it's interesting.
Yeah. It sucks to, you know, have the party end so abruptly, I suppose. Now, here's a question. Does it feel substantial to you? Because this is a big, heavy, solid motorcycle. It's all steel, all metal. Does that feel like a real motor, like not real bike in the Harley Pirate sense, but like not plasticky, not like a beginner bike or a cheap bike?
It doesn't feel cheap, but it does feel a lot lighter. It does, but that feels like that's on purpose. Unlike the MT-09 for something where you're like, oh geez, you guys were just trying to kind of pump out a bike here.
Yeah, it feels like it's purposefully light. Like they cut the weight in good places on that motorcycle. And I think actually the engine is one of the places where they cut a lot of weight.
Just by the materials of the case?
Yeah, I think parallel twins just inherently are lighter than V-twins because there's more steel, more, you know, metal around the engine.
It is funny how big of a difference it is though to like go from blubby power smooth butter throttle to this peppy brand new hot off the dealer floor torque.
Effervescent and playful bike.
Yeah, effervescent is a great way to describe it.
It's very playful, and I love that out of a cruiser. Now, do you think that this bike is being held back at all by, you know, do you think that the Scout, having ridden it in, is being held back by the fact that it has really budget suspension, really budget brakes, and, you know, basically trash tires? Does it feel like it's ruining the package to have all of that cheapness around it?
I think so. I think we would all dunk on the Scout less if it was set up proper.
So, you know, basically a little bit more modern, feeling like, you know, we had that sort of Showa front end on there, or the Showa rear shocks that the Rebel has, and, you know, preload adjustability and stuff. I really do think that this bike is adhering to heritage at its own detriment, you know?
Yeah, you have to be pretty heavy team aesthetics to look past all that and just kind of come to terms with it and be okay losing those aspects.
So, kind of following on from that, do you think that the Rebel needs more heritage in it? That it needs more of that kind of old school look and feel to really compete in the cruiser marketplace? Because honestly, I really don't think the Rebel is meant... Obviously, they basically copied the Sportster's homework, but I don't think it's meant to go out and convince any Harley guy to ride a Rebel. I think it's more basically to like tell people who might buy a Sporty, you know, who are like, I'm curious about getting on a cruiser for the first time. Should I get a Sportster or should I get a Rebel, you know? I think that there really is a place for both of these bikes. I don't necessarily think that because the Rebel isn't trying to be this big fancy cruiser that it is somehow better or worse than the Scout. You know, we can look at the individual parts and be like, yes, this is a better front fork on the Rebel. Yes, this is better rear suspension on the Rebel. But I feel like there's still a place for both of these kind of motorcycles. I just wish that when Indian had put this thing together, they had the wherewithal to put some slightly nicer suspension on this thing, because it feels so woeful, you know?
Yeah, I mean, probably, what was that, a bean counter decision? They're like, oh, this will do, this is fine.
Yeah, I honestly think that they were doing that sort of thing that motorcycle journalists would do, where they're like, okay, let's analyze the audience and then see if the bike fits that audience, you know? Being like, okay, who's going to buy a Scout? The people who are going to buy a Scout are Harley guys who want a little bit of power. They want a classic-looking motorcycle. So they're obviously not concerned about how it handles in a corner. And then we'll tell the motorcycle journalists, oh, it's a cruiser for the sportier rider kind of thing, you know? And then they were able to write off the suspension, being like, okay, we've made it so that we aren't going to have to worry about journalists bemoaning the suspension.
What a shame.
Yeah, I think that the Scout really, in that sense, is harmed by its old school looks. And I really think the biggest problem with the Scout is the way that they've designed the tank and the seat and the foot pegs. This whole orientation, your rider triangle, feels really weird on this motorcycle. It just doesn't feel comfortable to me, because I feel like I'm sitting on top of the bike versus the Rebel where you're sitting in it, you know?
Yeah, and it's much more commanding too.
So the last thing that I think really separates these two motorcycles is technology. You know, the Scout has basically nothing. It's got ride-by-wire, and that's kind of it. But the Rebel over there's got rider modes, it's got cruise control, it's got, you know, modern components and all that good stuff. Do you think that matters?
That's so tough, because I think about my BMW, right? That has nothing. It's got a speedometer. That's it. But I don't care because of how it looks, and right, it's one of those heritage bikes. But when you buy a 2021 motorcycle, you want those things. You want all the sprinkles on top, because it's the future. And you don't want to kind of be left behind or wishing for more, especially if you just bought a brand new motorcycle.
But let's say, for example, so the Rebel's got rider modes, traction control, electronic engine braking, which is adjustable, and cruise control. Let's say that they packed all of those things into the Scout or into your R9T. Do you think it would change the way you ride that motorcycle?
100%.
Like, would it make a positive impact or a negative one?
I think it would make a positive impact. I think it's like, whoa, you can have your cake and eat it too with a heritage bike. You know, versus just, well, this is all you really need, right? You don't really need all that other stuff. And you're like, well, yeah, but I kind of want it, you know?
So now, with all that being said, why don't we get to the bottom of D-Way here and pull over and talk about which one of these bikes is the better cruiser and whether or not heritage actually matters.
So bringing these bikes to a stop here at the bottom of D-Way, what do you think is the better motorcycle?
That's so hard to say. I mean, they both motorcycle great is what I'm trying to say. They both, you know, run and do that motorcycle thing that we all love. I don't know. Part of me wants to say, well, the Scout's kind of like, you know, more of that, but this is something all its own.
I think as a motorcycle, I like the Rebel 1100 better. It just feels like it's more competent in a corner. It feels like it's got more, it feels more peppy. It feels more fun, more playful. But now, which is the better cruiser? This one, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the laid back couch potato.
It's grumpy.
Feel. Yeah.
It's finicky. It likes its oatmeal a certain way.
It's a very tactile riding experience.
Yeah, for sure.
It feels like you're brawling with the bike when you're trying to get it through a corner. And I think that's what a lot of people like out of their cruiser. The sporty cruiser is kind of an oxymoron when you think of how much fun it is to kind of wrestle this thing around. I think that's what a lot of people dig in the cruiser marketplace. They like that feeling of
accomplishment.
Yeah.
They walk away from it being like, yeah.
Like this thing turns every corner into a challenge, right? You approach a corner and you're like, oh boy, am I gonna get through it? And then on the other side, you're like, yes, I did it. I got the Scout around the corner. Whereas this thing, it's like, come on, man. Really? Was that hard? It feels more sporty and more, it feels like it wants to be in a corner.
Yes, 100%.
Whereas this, you have to kind of convince it. You're like, it's gonna be okay, I promise, we're gonna get through it. Now, do you think that the heritage aspect of it matters? Do you think that it matters that this is, you know, some old school thing and this is some new school thing? Do you think it's detracting from either of these motorcycles to either have too much or not enough?
I don't think so, but that, you know, that's coming from my background. I don't think it necessarily takes away, but I do think you could have both. I just don't think a lot of companies are doing that. So in a sense, it does kind of take away from its full potential.
It feels to me like in the case with the Scout here, the heritage aspect is used as a shield to explain away a lot of the shortfalls with this motorcycle. They're like, oh, it doesn't need you know, rider modes, which this could actually benefit from because it's a heritage motorcycle. You know, I really do think that this motorcycle needs a rain mode.
Sure.
With how awful the tires are. Sure, you could get better rubber, but even then it's gonna spin the tires, guys. This thing is so torquey. It could benefit from a rain mode, and it not having it is a little bit of a bummer. I don't think this needs engine brake control. You know, I think that might be a little too much.
Right.
I feel like the ideal is somewhere in between these motorcycles.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, who do you think should be buying which bike? Like, I think this is granddad and this is grandson.
100%. Yeah, this is somebody who's like, look, I'm not going down twisty roads. I want to cruise with it. I want to go hang out with my buddies, and I want to be mean and finicky about it. This is like, you know, can't wait to get into it. You know, utilizing all the tech for it too, I think is a big part, where somebody who's a little bit older might be like, nah, I don't care about that.
Yeah. It really does feel like this is a motorcycle that's meant for somebody who all they want to do is just go cruise.
Yeah.
If all you want to do is cruise, feel good, look good, this is your motorcycle. And honestly, this one's not that much dearer. It's only $300 more, but it's not meant for this kind of rider. It's meant for the person who wants a sporting ride. And I think this one is probably more for me as a result. Which would you take?
I think I would take the Scout.
I mean, it makes sense. I kind of assume that, given your predilection for the you know, modern classic motorcycles.
It's super sexy, it's heavy, it's beefy, you know, but I did like this.
Yeah.
I think it was cool. I think for me, hopping on it for the first time, I am a little confused as to, wait, what should we be doing? Where should we be going with this kind of bike? But to me, that's fun. You're like, oh, all right, let's go anywhere.
It's got a little bit more adventurous spirit.
Oh, yeah.
Which I suppose makes sense, given that it's got an adventure bike engine in it. So guys, that is going to wrap it up for us. Let us know down below what you think. Do you think heritage makes a cruiser better, or do you think a more modern motorcycle is more fun and more, you know, just playful? And I certainly think so. And remember, if you want to win this motorcycle right here, click the link down below, go to yammynoob.co and get yourself signed up. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Oh, hey, you're still here. I can't believe you made it to the end of the video. Not many people